Runaway begs to see her son one last time. But when the man opens the door, what he finds in the boy's arms shocks everyone. Rate my story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain lashed against the window pane with an intensity that seemed determined to shatter the silence of the early morning. 30-year-old mechanic, Jake, startled awake to the insistent pounding on his front door. It was 3 in the morning, and nobody came to his modest house at this hour unless something serious was happening. He rose from bed, heart racing, still wearing the worn-out t-shirt he'd slept in. The knocking continued, more desperate with each second. As he approached the door, he could hear a woman's voice on the other side, whispering words he couldn't quite make out. The voice sounded familiar, but distorted by desperation and the relentless rain outside. Through the peephole, he glimpsed a hunched female figure, her hair plastered to her face by the driving rain. The woman held something in her arms, wrapped in an old, soaked blanket. The man's heart leaped when he realized it was a child. With trembling hands, he unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door open, keeping the security chain in place. The woman raised her face, revealing features he recognized instantly, even with the obvious signs of exhaustion and terror etched on every line. It was the nanny who had taken care of his daughter months ago, before disappearing without a trace on the same day the little girl vanished. The 30-year-old woman, with her desperate eyes and torn clothes, looked as though she had aged years in just a few months. Her face, once serene and trustworthy, now bore the marks of someone who had endured unimaginable hardships. "Please," she pleaded, her voice hoarse and broken. "I need you to help me. I need you to see my son one last time before I have to leave forever." The mechanic felt the world spin as he heard those words. The child in the woman's arms didn't move, only kept their face hidden against her chest, sheltering from the rain and cold. It was a small boy, apparently about 4 years old, wearing simple, worn-out boy's clothes. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, despite the turmoil of emotions that washed over him. "Where have you been all these months? And this child—" "He's my son," she replied quickly, clutching the boy protectively. "I know you don't understand, but I need you to help me. I have nobody else in the world, and soon I won't be able to take care of him anymore." The man observed the child more closely. There was something in the boy's posture, in the way he huddled against the woman, that stirred a strange feeling in his chest, a mixture of compassion and unease that he couldn't explain. The rain continued to fall heavily, forming puddles of water around the porch. The woman was shivering with cold, and the child in her arms seemed to be in an even worse state, with blue lips and a frail body trembling uncontrollably. "You can't stay out there in this rain," he said, fighting against his instincts for self-preservation. "Come in, at least until the storm passes." When he removed the chain and opened the door completely, the light from the hallway illuminated the child's face more clearly. The boy timidly raised his eyes, and at that moment the mechanic felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something in that gaze that deeply disturbed him. The woman entered quickly, carrying the child, who refused to let go of an old porcelain doll. The toy, even wet and dirty, seemed to be the boy's only comfort in that moment of terror. When the mechanic saw the doll, his heart nearly stopped. It was identical to the one his missing daughter used to carry everywhere. The same doll he had bought months before, from an antique store as a birthday present for the girl. "Where did he get that doll?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm as he pointed to the toy. The woman looked at the doll and then at him, with an expression that mixed guilt and defiance. "It belonged to my sister when she was a child. She gave it to my son before she passed away." The answer rang false in the mechanic's ears. He knew every detail of that doll, from the small crack in its right arm to the lace dress he himself had had specially sewn for his daughter's gift. The child remained silent, clinging to the doll as if his life depended on it. When the man tried to approach to get a better look at the boy, the child hid even further in the woman's arms, trembling with fear. "He doesn't like strange men," the nanny explained quickly. "He's had bad experiences in the past." The mechanic felt a lump in his throat as he realized the state of terror the child was in. There was something deeply wrong with that situation, but he couldn't exactly identify what it was. The only certainty he had was that that doll couldn't be there by chance. The woman settled on the sofa in the small living room, still holding the child, who refused to leave her arms. The mechanic watched her every move, trying to decipher the contradictions that jumped out at him. The nanny he had known months ago was an organized and careful person, but the woman in front of him seemed completely distraught. "You need to tell me what really happened," he said, sitting in the armchair across from the sofa, keeping a respectful distance so as not to scare the child even more. "Where have you been all this time? Why did you disappear on the same day as my daughter?" The woman's expression hardened, and she clutched the boy even more protectively. "I didn't disappear. I left because I found out I was pregnant and couldn't continue working. You never cared about me as a person, only as an employee." Her words sounded like an accusation, but the mechanic knew there was something much more complex behind that version of events. He remembered perfectly the last day he had seen her. She had taken his daughter to play in the park, as she did every afternoon, but neither of them had returned home. "If you were pregnant at the time, how is this child 4 years old now?" he asked, pointing to the boy, who continued to hide his face. "The math doesn't add up." The woman hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously around the room, as if searching for a suitable answer. I lied about being pregnant. Actually, I already had this son, but I never told anyone because I was ashamed of being a single mother." Every word that came out of her mouth increased the mechanic's suspicions. He knew that house well. He knew where every object was stored. But the woman demonstrated an unsettling familiarity with the environment, as if she knew exactly where to find things. During the conversation, she casually mentioned that the towels were in the hall closet, information she shouldn't have had, since the private area of the house had always been restricted when she worked there. She also commented on the noise the refrigerator made during the early morning hours, a detail that only someone who had slept in the house could know. "How do you know about these things?" he questioned, beginning to feel uncomfortable with the situation. "Well, I worked here for months. It's natural that I observe some details," she replied, but her voice trembled slightly. The mechanic got up and went to the kitchen to get water and some crackers for the child. When he returned, he found the boy staring intently at a framed photograph that sat on a sideboard near the sofa. It was a picture of his missing daughter, smiling on her last birthday. The child extended a small finger towards the photograph, whispering something so low that only the woman could hear. She immediately pulled the child's hand away from the image, but not before the mechanic noticed the gesture. "What did he say?" he asked, approaching slowly. "Nothing important. He just thought the frame was pretty," she replied quickly, but her hands were visibly trembling. The man knelt in front of the child, keeping a safe distance so as not to scare him. "What's your name, little one?" he asked in the softest voice he could muster. The boy looked at the woman before answering, as if asking for permission. She nodded nervously, and he whispered a name that the mechanic couldn't hear clearly. "Can you repeat that?" he insisted gently. This time, the child spoke a little louder, but the pronunciation was strange, as if he were forcing the words or trying to remember something he had been taught recently. The woman stood up abruptly, interrupting the conversation. "He's tired and hungry. Do you have anything he can eat?" While the mechanic prepared a simple snack in the kitchen, he took the opportunity to observe the pair through the opening that connected the rooms. The child had relaxed a little and was examining the doll carefully, turning it from side to side as if looking for something specific. Suddenly, the boy did something that made the mechanic's heart race. He began to gently press the doll's belly, exactly at the point where there was a secret mechanism that he himself had installed. It was a small voice recorder that played a special message whenever activated in the correct way. The woman realized what was happening and quickly snatched the doll from the child's hands. But it was already too late. The faint, almost imperceptible sound of a recording began to echo through the room. The mechanic left everything in the kitchen and ran to the living room, arriving just in time to hear his own voice coming from the doll. "I love you, my little princess. Daddy will always be here for you." The message he had recorded especially for his missing daughter now filled the silence of the room, creating an almost unbearable tension. The woman turned completely pale, and the child began to cry, reaching out towards the doll. "How does this child know how to activate this mechanism?" the mechanic asked, his voice filled with an emotion he could barely control. "How does she know exactly where to press to hear the message?" The woman stood up, staggering, holding the doll firmly out of the child's reach. That must be coincidence. Children like to press things, it's normal." But the mechanic knew it wasn't coincidence. The mechanism was too complex to be activated by chance. It required a specific sequence of touches that only he and his daughter knew. It was the special secret they shared, something he had taught her as an intimate game between father and daughter. The child continued to cry and struggle in the woman's arms, clearly wanting the doll back. In desperation, she shouted a single word that made the mechanic's world collapse. "Daddy!" The word echoed through the room like thunder, followed by a deafening silence. The mechanic felt his legs weaken, and for a moment he believed that his ears had betrayed him. The child had called for Daddy, but was in the arms of a woman who swore to be his biological mother. The nanny realized her mistake and immediately began to rock the child, whispering words of comfort in his ear. "Shh, my love. You're confused, you're tired. This isn't your home, remember." But the boy continued to struggle, reaching out towards the mechanic with an expression of recognition that was impossible to ignore. The child's eyes, even swollen from crying so much, shone with a familiarity that cut the man's heart like a blade. "Let me hold him," asked the mechanic, taking a step forward with outstretched arms. "No!" the woman screamed, recoiling and clutching the child even tighter. "He doesn't know you. He'll be even more scared." The man stopped where he was, but didn't take his eyes off the child. There was something in the boy's expression that stirred fragmented memories in his mind. The way he wrinkled his nose when he was about to cry. The way he bit his lower lip when he felt insecure. They were small gestures, almost imperceptible, but deeply familiar. "You said his name was—" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. The woman hesitated, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "Michael, his name is Michael." "Michael," repeated the mechanic, observing the child's reaction. The boy didn't show any response to his own name, as if he didn't recognize it or wasn't used to being called that. The rain outside had diminished to a fine drizzle, but the curtains remained closed, creating a claustrophobic atmosphere in the small room. The woman moved restlessly around the room, stopping occasionally to look through the crack in the curtains, as if she were expecting or fearing someone's arrival. "Why are you so nervous?" the mechanic questioned. "If there's nothing wrong, why the rush to leave?" "I already explained. I have legal problems. I can't stay in the same place for long," she replied, but her explanation sounded vague and rehearsed. The man decided to try a different approach. He went to the sideboard and picked up a photo album he kept there, flipping through the pages until he found pictures of his daughter at different ages. He carefully approached the pair and opened the album to a specific photo. "This is my daughter," he said, showing a picture of the girl at 3 years old, playing on the same sofa where they were now sitting. "She disappeared on the day you left." The child looked at the photograph with immediate interest, leaning in to get a better look at the image. His small fingers delicately traced the outline of the girl in the photo, as if he recognized something familiar. "She looks like me," whispered the child, in a voice so low that only the mechanic could hear. The woman immediately snatched the album from the child's hands. "Stop filling his head with these ideas. He's my son, not your missing daughter." "Then why did he say she looks like him?" insisted the mechanic, feeling that he was getting close to something important. "Children say anything. He sees similarities in anyone the same age," she retorted, but her voice trembled with nervousness. The man continued flipping through the album, stopping at a photo where his daughter appeared with a band-aid on her knee, the result of a fall she had taken in the backyard. "She hurt her knee right here," he said, pointing to the image. "She fell off her bike and was left with a very small scar shaped like a crescent moon." The child instinctively brought his hand to his own knee, touching a specific spot through his pants. The gesture was so natural and automatic that there was no way it could be a coincidence. "Can I see your knee, Michael?" the mechanic asked, using the name the woman had given the child. "There's no need for that," she quickly interjected. "And besides, it's getting late. We need to leave." But the child had begun to roll up his pant leg, revealing a small mark on his left knee. It wasn't just any scar. It had exactly the crescent moon shape that the mechanic remembered perfectly. The man's heart leaped at the sight of that mark. It was impossible for it to be a coincidence. That was the same scar that his daughter carried in the same location with the same distinctive shape. "How do you explain this?" he asked, pointing to the scar. The woman looked at the mark and then at him, clearly searching for a plausible explanation. "Many children fall and get hurt. It's normal to have scars on their knees." "But not in this exact shape. In the same place," retorted the mechanic, feeling the tension grow in the room. The child began to stir again, pointing to one of the photographs in the album and whispering something unintelligible. The mechanic moved closer to hear better and was able to distinguish a few fragmented words. "My bike, pink." In the photograph, his daughter was standing next to a pink bicycle, the same one she had received on her 3rd birthday. It was a detail too specific to be the product of the imagination of a child who supposedly had never been in that house. "How does he know about the pink bicycle?" he asked, turning to face the woman. He must have seen it somewhere." "Children have fertile imaginations," she stammered, but her explanation was becoming less and less convincing. The mechanic closed the album and put it aside, then knelt in front of the child, maintaining a respectful distance. "Do you remember anything about this house?" he asked gently. The child looked nervously at the woman, as if asking for permission to speak. She shook her head in the negative, but the boy began to point discreetly to different corners of the room. "There," he whispered, indicating a specific corner near the window. "My little house was there." The mechanic felt a shiver run down his spine. In the location indicated by the child, there had been for months a small dollhouse that he had bought for his daughter. The dollhouse had been put away after the girl's disappearance, but the marks on the floor were still visible to anyone who knew where to look. The woman stood up abruptly, holding the child tightly. "That's enough. I'm not going to stay here listening to these fabrications. We're leaving now." The mechanic positioned himself between the woman and the door, blocking her exit. "You're not leaving here with this child until you explain to me properly what's going on. Get out of my way," she screamed in a voice that betrayed total panic. "You have no right to stop me from leaving with my own son." But he didn't move. All the signs pointed to a truth that his heart had already accepted, even if his mind still struggled to process the magnitude of the situation. "This child is my daughter, isn't she?" The woman took a few steps back, clutching the child even tighter. "You're crazy, delusional. My son is not your daughter." "Then prove it," said the mechanic, picking up his phone and beginning to dial a number. "I'm going to call the police. If there's really nothing wrong, you have no reason to worry." "No!" she screamed, dropping the child on the sofa and lunging at him, trying to grab the phone from his hands. "You don't understand." "You can't call the police. In the struggle for the phone, the porcelain doll fell to the floor and shattered, revealing something that was hidden inside. In addition to the recording mechanism, there were small personal objects. A bracelet with the girl's name, some miniaturized photographs, and a note written in his daughter's childish handwriting. The child climbed off the sofa and knelt next to the wreckage of the doll, delicately picking up the note and handing it to the mechanic. With trembling hands, he read the words written in crayon, "Daddy, help me, I'm scared." At that moment, the child looked directly into his father's eyes and whispered in a voice that he recognized immediately, "Daddy, I knew you were going to find me." The woman collapsed to the floor, covering her face with her hands and beginning to sob uncontrollably. "I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted to have a daughter too. I just wanted to be a mother." The truth finally came out amid tears and broken confessions. The nanny had developed an unhealthy obsession with the girl during the months she cared for her. When she learned that she would be dismissed for inappropriate behavior, she made a desperate decision in the park on that fateful day. "I took her to the mountains," she confessed between sobs. "There was an abandoned cabin where nobody could find us. I cut her hair, bought her boys' clothes, taught her to call herself Michael." The mechanic knelt next to his daughter, who was now trembling not with fear, but with relief. "For months, I tried to make her forget about you," continued the woman. "I told her you didn't want her anymore, that you had asked me to take her away. But I never forgot about Daddy," whispered the girl, hugging her father tightly. "I kept the doll hidden and put important things inside it. I knew that one day you would find me." The kidnapper's confession revealed horrific details of the months of captivity. She had subjected the child to constant brainwashing, punishing her whenever she mentioned her father or showed signs of remembering her previous life. The girl had developed a deep fear of men because the woman constantly said that all men were dangerous, especially her father. "I realized that the police were getting close," continued the nanny. "Someone recognized me in the neighboring town yesterday. I knew I had little time, so I decided to bring her back." The mechanic hugged his daughter, smelling her hair and confirming every physical detail he had memorized. Even with her transformed appearance, even with the visible trauma in her eyes, it was unequivocally his girl. "Why did you bring her here if you knew I was going to find out the truth?" he asked, still trying to understand the logic behind the kidnapper's actions. "I thought that if I could convince you that she was my son, you might adopt her," admitted the woman. "That way I could visit her sometimes, continue being a part of her life in some way." The child pulled away slightly from her father's embrace and whispered, "She made me call her Mommy, but I never forgot that you're my real dad." The next hours were a whirlwind of emotions and procedures. The police arrived, alerted by a call that the mechanic had managed to make during the confusion. The nanny was arrested without resistance, clearly relieved to finally be able to stop running. The doctors who examined the girl confirmed signs of psychological trauma, but also an impressive resilience. During the months of captivity, she had created internal protection mechanisms that helped her keep her true identity intact. "She's going to need a lot of support and therapy," explained the child psychologist who followed the case. "But children are surprisingly adaptable. With love and patience, she can recover completely." The process of readaptation wasn't easy. The girl had frequent nightmares and moments of panic when she saw women with characteristics similar to the kidnapper. But with each passing day, small progress was celebrated as great victories. The mechanic transformed his routine completely to dedicate himself to his daughter's recovery. He closed the shop temporarily and focused on rebuilding the trust and the bonds that had been violently interrupted. Slowly, the girl began to show interest in her old activities. She asked for her hair to grow again, chose feminine clothes, and above all, began to smile more often. A year later, father and daughter were in the same park where it had all begun. The girl, now 5 years old and with long hair again, was playing in the same area where she had been kidnapped, But this time, her father didn't lose sight of her for even a second. "Daddy," she said, running to him with a flower she had picked. "Do you think that one day I'll be able to forget the bad things that happened?" He picked her up and hugged her tight. "Maybe you'll never forget completely, little princess. But what matters is that now we're together, and nothing and nobody will separate us again." The girl smiled and planted a kiss on her father's cheek. "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for never giving up on looking for me." At that moment, watching his daughter play freely under the afternoon sun, the mechanic knew that he had won the most important battle of his life. There were no fortunes or riches that could compare to the value of having his girl back in his arms, safe and sound, and with a future full of possibilities ahead. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.